talk a second about John Thomerson, who's going to be preaching this morning. And he's doing that because I had knee surgery this week, and I thought, I may be on drugs this week. I might not be able to say what I'm supposed to be saying correctly. And that was supposed to be funny. But anyway, maybe I am on drugs. No, I'm not on drugs anymore, not on any pain medication. But thank you for praying for me as my knee surgery, everything went well. But I asked John Thomerson to preach. John was the pastor here for 9 long years. This is the first time I have ever heard him preach. He has preached for me for 17 years. He's filled in. He's been faithful. Now, I've heard lots of his funerals. I mean, he's done funerals. He's good at funerals, let me tell you. But it's the first time I've watched some video of him just because somebody said, oh, Pastor John said a joke, you better go make sure that was okay before we put that up on the internet. So I've watched some of those, but I get the privilege of hearing him. Now, when I first came here as pastor, he asked me this question, is it okay if I stay here? Is it okay if I stay as a member here? And I said, absolutely. There's been no greater supporter, no greater prayer warrior for me than John Thomerson. He has just been very supportive of me and my ministry. Whereas a lot of retired pastors or former pastors would be jealous or be, back in the limelight, all that stuff, he's never done that. To my knowledge, he's never said anything bad about me in public. But he's going to preach in a few minutes, and I'm grateful for Pastor John, and he does a great job, and we'll hope that you'll pray as he preaches in a few minutes.
Our text is found in Jeremiah chapter 29. God's children, God's precious children, Israel, were in captivity. I don't know if it's ever dawned on you or not, if you've ever thought about it, but when the children of Israel moved out of Egypt through the wilderness wandering and finally into the promised land, they moved into homes they didn't build. They drank from wells they didn't dig. They harvested fruit they didn't plant. They threshed wheat that they didn't sow. God had everything ready for them when they moved in. How blessed they were. But they got busy. And the issues of life and having to find out what the neighbors thought about the weather and visiting and all, and they soon forget about God and kind of push Him back to the back burner, and worship becomes just kind of a ritual. You just go through, and they did that, and they just forgot about God. The Bible says over and over, every man did what seemed right in his own sight. Sounds a lot like not right now to me. Every man doing what seems right in his own. Too busy for God. We know He's there. We know He's blessed us. We know He has multiple things He wants us to do, but we're so busy. Well, God had to deal with His children, and so for 70 years He had going to keep them in captivity in Babylon. And Jeremiah writes in his prophecy about that period of time when Israel was in captivity because they had just pushed God aside and done their own thing. So I want to read you some verses. I'm going to have to use a magnifying glass. I have some eye problems. Pray for my eyes. I have cataract on this right eye, I can't see, and wet macular degeneration in the left eye, and I'm getting some treatments for that. But in the meantime, I have a hard time seeing. I can see you, so don't try to sneak out. But Isaiah 29, beginning at verse 10. For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you, and I will perform my good word toward you to cause you to return to this place. 70 years, I'm going to keep you here till you get so desperate, so hungry for me, that you're going to seek me. It'll take 70 years for that to happen. For I know the thoughts that I have toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end, or as the NIV version says, to give you a hope for your future. Now listen to this. Then shall you call upon me, and you shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. Here's the text. And you shall seek me and find me when you search for me with all of your heart. And I will be found of you, saith the Lord. And I will return you out of your captivity, and I will gather you from out of this place. Or I will gather you out of all of the nations, and from all of the places whither I have sent you. He goes on to say that he will deliver them from their captivity. Out of God's blessings, out of God's peace, out of God's provision, out of God's blessings in captivity. We're not in Babylon, but in a very real sense, Satan has us in his clutches, and we're in a captivity. There's some evidences, 7 of them, that I just jotted down here that I thought we could mention. 7 evidences of our being in captivity. You know, there's three kinds of sin. There's sins of omission, things we ought to do that we don't do. And sins of commission, things we ought not to do that we do. And then there's sins of disposition, sins of our spirit, sins of our mind and our inner being. I've said sometimes we need a checkup from the neck up to check on our disposition. Well, one of the ways you know you're in captivity is your attitude. Your attitudes of criticism, of complaining, fault-finding, backbiting. And secondly, there are the bad habits that we have and we just can't seem to break. We don't really try very hard, but we talk about it. And there's a third evidence of being in captivity, and that's out of our mouth. Our son J.D., when he was in the 3rd grade, there was a girl there that they called Motor Mouth. And Motor Mouth just talked all the time. And sometimes we're a little guilty of Motor Mouth. I'll tell you a story if you won't get mad. If you promise you won't get mad at me? Okay. The church needed a pastor. And they had appointed a pastor search committee, and they had looked at resumes, and they found one they liked pretty well, and they investigated, and finally they went to hear the preacher preach. And the committee got all gathered in, and he preached for 9 minutes, and he sat down. He was through. They said, "Wow, man, that's what we're looking for right there. That's our kind of preacher." So they invited him to come preach a trial sermon in view of a call, and he came and he preached 11 minutes. He sat down. The call was unanimous. Man, that's the preacher we want right there. They moved him in, and he was ready for his first sermon as pastor, and he came and he preached for 1 hour and 13 minutes. Well, they had an emergency deacons meeting that very afternoon. And called a preacher in and said, "Well, you preached 9 minutes, 11." He said, "Well, I can explain that." Said, when you came to hear me preach, I was having my teeth pulled. And my roots were way down deep, and I had to split my gums a little bit. And the dentist kept saying, "Open wide, open wide." And he said, my jaw was so sore and my gums were so tender. And 9 minutes was all I could go. And I said, "Well, what about when you came?" He said, "Well, I had just gotten my new teeth, and they didn't fit, and they were slipping, and they were sliding, and they were binding, and they were pinching, and 11 minutes was all I could go." And then, well, what about today? An hour and 13 minutes. And he said, well, we were moved in and we hadn't got everything unpacked and we didn't get up in time and we didn't want to be late and we were rushing around, and I went out the door and I grabbed my wife's teeth by mistake. So, sometimes we need to be careful about what comes out of our mouth. An hour and 13 minutes would be a little long. David said in Psalm 142, "Set a guard over my mouth and keep a watch over the doors of my lips." What comes out of what's in us is what comes out of us when we speak. So there's sins of a negative, complaining attitude. There's sins of those old bad habits. There's the sins that come out of our mouth. There's the no joy in service. We do it. We're doing our duty. It's the thing we're supposed to do. We do it, but there's real no joy. All of this is evidences that we're in a form of captivity, not into God's blessings and God's peace and God's provisions and God's plenty and God's presence abiding with us and living the abundant life. We're in a captivity. Our prayers seem to get no further than the ceiling if we have time to really pray at all. We have issues at home and school and work and they get the better of us so that we dwell on all of that instead of thinking about God. We're in a captivity. Well, the question then is, if, like God's children were in captivity, we who are God's children today are in a captivity, how do we get out of it? God said, I'm going to keep you there 70 years till you get right and get ready to seek me. We don't have to wait 70 years. We can do it today. The answer is seeking the Lord. That's how we get out. We seek the Lord. And we seek Him exclusively. Seek Him. That's what He said. When you seek me. I'm old enough, I've been around the block more than one time. And I've been in a lot of different churches, and I've known a lot of different Christians. And I know one thing for sure, most of the time we seek God's things rather than we seek God. God, would you bless this? God, would you care for this? God, would you heal this? God, we need you to move in this situation. God, we want your things. We want you to do, we want your gifts. We want your works. God, we're praying for you to do these. We're not seeking you, Lord. We're just wanting your works, wanting your gifts. Come June, Patty Sue and I will have been married 58 years. But it wasn't easy. I mean, the 58 years have been okay. I think that's going to work out. But the getting there wasn't easy. When I saw her, the very first time I saw her, I knew she was God's gift to me. You talk about love at first sight, man, that's what it was, love at first sight. I knew she was God's gift to me. Now, you're not going to believe this, but she didn't think I was God's gift to her. Matter of fact, she didn't even think I was a gift. And she knew God didn't have anything to do with it. And I had to set a course of winning her and bringing her to me. And so I gave her little gifts. Well, I all day sucker, you know. So I said, I'm going to think about you all day. You think about me all day. And I'd write little love notes. And in the little snack place at Belmont called the Dixie Den, if you bought a Coke, you got it in a Dixie Darling cup. And if you got a straw, the straw was wrapped in a sweetheart straw wrapper. And you could buy a honey bun pastry. And forever yours candy bar. Well, I would take the sweetheart, cut it out of the straw, and the Dixie Darling, I'd cut the Darling out of the cup, and the honey, I'd cut off the honey bun, and I'd write her little love notes and glue those things on. Man, I was creative. And I would write her little poems and stick in her mailbox. I'm sitting in here in class waiting for the bell to ring, knowing when I see you makes my heart sing. And you know, the one I wrote I thought was particularly good. The moon is bright, the planets too, the stars in heaven know I love you. I'd write all these little poems, and I gave her a little skunk, a little stuffed skunk, and said, life stinks when I'm not with you. And all of these, I didn't give her those things for her to take to her roommate and show the girls in the dormitory, look what John gave me, look at this gift. I got this gift today. I got this gift. Look at this, and I'm going to put it in my box here, and I'm going to keep it. It's a gift. I didn't give her those things to be given a gift. I gave her those things to say, hey, I want you to come to me. Hey, I want you to know me. Hey, I want you to come and let's fellowship and talk and share. Hey, I want you to be mine. Hey, I want you to love me. I want you to come and let us have a life together. Come to me. The gifts were not to just give a gift. The gifts were to say, come to me. God gives us gifts. And that's about all we ever ask for. But he says, don't stop at the gift, go to the giver. Don't stop with the blessing, go to the blesser. Don't stop with the work, go to the worker. Don't stop with the peace, go to the man who gives the peace, who has all peace. Jesus is saying today to you, I give you gifts. I bless you. I love you. Come to me. Seek me. Seek me. Don't settle for anything less than me. There's a story over in 2 Kings about a Shunammite woman, 2 Kings 4. It's a rather lengthy story, but it's about Elijah and his friend Gehazi. I guess Gehazi was like a worship leader that went with Elisha. And Elisha and Gehazi met a woman. Says she was a great woman. I think it meant she had lots of money. And she said, come and eat with me. And he said, okay, I believe I will. And he did. And she must have had fried chicken and biscuits and gravy and green beans and mashed potatoes and coconut cake and all, because every time he came, he went to eat with her. And if he was anywhere close, he'd go to eat with her. And finally she said to her husband, hey, this guy coming all the time. Let's build him a little room where he can put a bed and a table and a candle and a stool, and it can be his chamber, so that when he comes, he can have a place to stay, he and Gehazi. And so they did, and Elisha had his little room with the Shunammite woman. And one day he said, you've been so good to me. What can I do for you? And she said, I don't eat anything. And Gehazi, the prophet, said, after she left, you know, she doesn't have any children. And Elisha prayed and called her in and said, God's going to give you a son. By this time next year, you're going to be a mama. You're going to have a baby boy. And sure enough, she did. And the child grew, and he went out in the fields with his father and evidently had a sunstroke. He said, my head, oh, my head. And the father said, take him to his mother, and she held him on her lap, and he died. And she took him up to the prophet's chamber and laid him on Elisha's bed, went to her husband and said, I need a donkey, and I need somebody to go with me. And he said, it's not a day of worship. It's not any feast day or something. Why are you going? And she said, it's okay. I'm going to go. I got to go to the prophet. And she told the guy going with her, said, go as fast as you can. Put the pedal to the metal. Said, if I need you to slow down, I'll tell you, but let's go as fast as we can. They went, found Elisha, told him what was going on, and Elisha said to Gehazi, the servant, you take my staff and you go and you lay it on top of this dead boy. And Gehazi took the staff and started out. And the Shunammite woman said, thank you. I appreciate you sending Gehazi. That's real sweet of you. That's real nice. That's a good thing you're doing. But I ain't leaving here till you go with me. And I know I'm going to stay until you're ready to go with me. I'm settling for nothing less than you. And if you'll read the story, you'll find that when Gehazi put the staff on the child, he didn't respond at all. But when Elisha came on the scene, the child was revived and he gave her back to his mother. Don't settle for second best. Don't settle for the gifts. Don't settle for the blessings. Go to the giver. Go to the blesser. Get in His presence. He's saying to you, hey, I want you to come. Hey, I want you to know me better. Hey, I want to bless you more. Hey, I want us to have a real love relationship, an intimate time of being and sharing together. Don't settle for less than the best. Seek Him. Seek Him exclusively. And seek Him earnestly. Earnestly. I'll tell you another story. After we were married and moved to Knoxville, Patty Sue decided we needed a fence on the back of our property. She said, we can go and Daddy and you can cut down some cedar trees and we'll have a cedar rail fence. We went on the 4th of July. Temperature was about 95 and the humidity was right there with it. I mean, it was a hot, muggy day. I was sweating before we got out of the yard. But we were going to go cut down some cedar trees. He cut them down and he measured them and he trimmed them and he got them all ready. My job was to pick them up and to drag them to a certain spot where we could get a trailer and put them in. That's all I was going to do. He did the work. I just taken the what he had done to the pile. Man, I was sweating. I mean, I was drenched. My shoes were squeaky from sweat, and we'd been out maybe an hour or maybe longer, and all at once something happened to me. I'm not sure yet what it was. But I knew if I didn't get me some water, I was going to be in pretty deep trouble. Everything about me was crying out for water. I'd quit sweating. I wasn't sweating anymore. I guess I didn't have anything to sweat. Well, there was a spring that came out from under the rock not too far from where we were. And I dropped my rails that I was carrying. I didn't care anything about cedar fence. I didn't care anything about Patty Sue's daddy thinking I was a city wimp. I didn't care anything about knowing that the deer were drinking from that spring and I'd probably be stepping in something as I got to it. I didn't care that I had to lay down on my stomach in the mud and stick my head in the water. I didn't care about anything except I had to have some water. Patty Sue's daddy said I white-eyed. I don't know what that means, but I don't ever want to do it again. But everything about me had to get to water. I had to have some water. I was earnestly seeking some water for my body. David wrote in, I believe it's the 40th Psalm, as the deer panteth after the water brook, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. If we could pant for God like I was panting for water that day, if we could be earnest about our our relationship with God, if we could really, regardless of whatever's going on around me, sink or swim, live or die, I'm going to get in the presence of God. It doesn't matter about what people might say. It doesn't matter about how I have to rearrange my schedule. It doesn't matter about what sacrifices I might have to make. I am determined that I am going to seek God earnestly. Earnestly. With my whole being, I'm going to seek Him. That's how we get out of captivity. And you know, the good thing about all that is the Bible says, God says to Jeremiah, if you will seek me exclusively, not my things, not my gifts, not my works, don't be satisfied with that. If you'll seek me exclusively, and if you'll seek me earnestly, abandoning everything to find me, you can seek me expectantly. I'll not hide from you. You won't believe this, but Patty Sue used to hide from me. She worked in the Dean of Students office at Belmont, and when I would come to bring her one of my gifts, she would hide behind the door. Till I saw her feet one day and I knew she was there, so I just opened the door and gave her my gift. God won't do that. God won't hide from you. He said, I'll be found of you, and I'll release you from your captivity, and I will restore your prosperity. Very simple recipe. Seek Him exclusively. Seek Him earnestly. Seek Him expectantly. And you'll find Him. He'll be there. And He'll say, welcome, come on in. Let's spend some time. Let's get to know each other. Let me share my love for you, and you come to love me more and more. The more we find Him, the more we experience Him, the more we can trust Him. We have trouble trusting Him with His promises. Well, that may be for Pastor Craig, or that may be for somebody else, but I don't think that's for me. But it is for us. Trust Him. We'll learn to trust Him more and love Him more. And when we trust Him more and love Him more, we can serve Him so much more effectively. The hymn writer says, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take Him at His word, just to rest upon His promise, just to know, thus saith the Lord."